Hi everyone, my name's Dave Nolan and I'm here to say kill your staging servers, death to staging and test in prod and all sorts of other reckless, ill-founded, foolish things. And I'm delighted actually to be following on from you, Victor, because I think there's a real compliment what you're saying and what I'm saying, which is great. So yeah, at first blush, I think a lot of what I might say might sound foolish and unfeasible, impractical. Success for me for this talk would be that at least some of you go back and just reevaluate what the value that a staging environment is giving you, and see whether actually some of the activities, tasks that you perform in staging might be shifted back down to element or up to production. And hopefully in about 10 minutes time, some of you I might have persuaded you to do those. So the reason I got interested in this, I've actually been kind of following this mindset for about 4.5, 5 years now. Got really interested in continuous delivery, joined Lonely Planet and started looking at how we're using staging server and essentially reducing the necessity of it bit by bit, day by day, and now kind of followed that up with where I'm working now at Appear Here. So what I want to be able to do is hopefully bring some of the experiences, successes and failures to bear on what I say. I just want a ticker. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is follows on from what you were saying, which is the techniques of continuous delivery are a necessity. So they don't go away. A lot of the things I'm going to suggest we should be doing anyway. When you compare that to the hidden costs and difficulties and risks associated with maintaining a staging environment, actually you can extend those necessities and turn them into benefits, and the virtue of which is you can remove this environment and remove this gate. This is what I'm hoping to motivate today. And hopefully engender some challenge and some discussion about how to do that. I know from experience working with my own team, they're very challenging of this whole notion. So, okay, so I'm going to start with trying to not build a straw man, but really motivate why we have staging environments, why they've become more or less a default part of a release pipeline today. Then I'm going to look at some of the hidden costs and risks. Then I'm going to kind of walk through a fictional example that's based on my experience over the last few years. And finally, I'm going to follow up with a few hypotheses to kind of frame and underpin this mindset. All right? So, yeah, and there's going to be bobcats. If anyone is kind of averse to bobcats, then, please, now's the time to leave. Okay, so let's be precise. So when I mean a staging environment, what I mean is a permanent general purpose environment that mirrors production and is the gate to production. I'm explicitly ruling out from my target ephemeral branch builds or custom environments that are short-lived. I'm talking about something that is a permanent feature in your release pipeline that has got some set of checks that must be passed in order for code changes or change sets to be promoted to production. And it's general purpose. There's lots of different activities that are associated with this environment, whether it's QA, UAT, whether it's exploratory testing, even by developers. There's lots of different things that might be associated with it. And the goal, it's kind of raison d'etre, if you like, is that it somehow mirrors production. So in a nutshell, and this is what a friend of mine says, being dumb in staging beats being clever in production. And that's why, in a nutshell, that's why staging is valuable. So specifically, the staging environment is supposed to be relatively low maintenance. It's quite easy to, with the tools that we have nowadays, we can clone and slightly modify a specific piece of our infrastructure or configuration management, or at least the promise of doing that is there. And once we've done that, then it becomes quite straightforward to catch a broad class of configuration, integration, and data errors. And it acts as a nice firewall from exploratory testing and errors that might creep in. between us and the rest of the business, or indeed our users. Let's not forget them. And the fact that we can put that staging environment into a known good state just makes it a really convenient gate and place for these other activities to take place. You know, maybe marketing needs to sign this off. Maybe we need to queue it up to meet a specific deadline. Who knows? So very convincing. I'm always convinced by myself. Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit one by one. So the first claim was that it was low maintenance. And I think, you know, going back to the ease of tooling that we've got these days, that's kind of misleading, because actually what we need to do is a lot of custom domain-specific code in order to keep some recognizable replicant or mirror of production. And I just want to give some specific examples from my experience of where this might kind of come back and bite you in parts of your body. So the first thing is, in many businesses, you can't just clone your production database and then expose that to whoever is in your development, testing, operations team. You may need to go ahead and anonymize that, remove personally identifiable information, or credit card details, whatever that might be. So great, okay. Doing that is not always a straightforward task. I mean, let's take email. You might have a unique constraint on your email field in your database. So now your code is to anonymize your data has got to work around that. You may have all sorts of other domain-specific changes to make in order to get a representative set of data that is anonymized. And that is one thing that has bitten me in the past, is falling foul of unique constraint on a database field for emails and trying to pipe fake data in there. And once you do get fake data in there, you may well find that that's completely unrepresentative anyway. So to give you an example, we've got a beautiful, on a site I worked on, customers can produce a profile page for their business, and the fake data that we were showing in staging had, beautiful images, all of the right size, just the right length of text, just the right pieces of information. It was a complete profile. It looked fantastic. Of course, when it shipped to production, no one had that. They had, pictures of, pictures taken by potatoes. I mean, it was just, it was completely unrepresentative. And again, a point of difference between production and staging. Unrepresentative sample data. If you're working at scale, it's not always a case of just copy-paste your data. You may just have too much of it. It may be very expensive and slow to ship this stuff around. Great, okay, so now let's take a sample or a slice of it. Fine, now you've got to work out for your domain how to ensure that referential integrity is kept and you have a representative sample. Excellent, you're nodding, thank you very much. Yeah, and this was a problem that we faced at Lonely Planet. We had huge numbers of POIs, points of interest, and data about places. It was all hooked together in a massive kind of tree format, and pulling out sufficient data to make staging representative was a challenge, and it was a domain-specific custom challenge. There's nothing like off-the-shelf you can do. You're always having to think about, okay, I've made this change, so what does that mean for me now in my staging environment to try and mirror what we've got here? And then you've got obvious ones like out-of-date data. Are you absolutely certain that your staging server is up to date? At what schedule does it remain up to date? What schedule does it reset? Have you got dirty data that's in there by testing? Have you got, have people actually got access to the database and they've done bad things there, which means other things break in production? So this is just a kind of a sample of places where the putative low maintenance staging server actually turns out to be something that you've got to reason about and spend dev resources, operational resources trying to keep in sync. Yeah, so all the world's a staging environment, and all the email addresses merely example@example.com, right? So, it can be very misleading to assume that your staging environment really mirrors production. Next thing, configuration maintenance. So a big source of the hidden cost of staging environment is working out for each of your third-party integrations what staging means for them. So you may be working with something nice like Stripe, which has got various test keys and test credit card numbers and various things, or you may be working with someone horrible like blank that doesn't have anything like that, doesn't even understand the notion of having a sandbox or anything like that. So now you've got to work out how you're going to either accept that you're actually making a real call to a real third-party API, or work around it in your own domain. Specific example of that would be email and message delivery. So if you're sending SMSs or emails, are they actually going to go? Are they going to go to all addresses or just some of them? Are they only some domains allowed? You know, you have to reason about this. It's not just drop, you know, click and drag and drop or whatever. And finally, you've added a piece of complexity, which is tracking your production configuration and mapping that to your staging configuration. Don't underestimate how much complexity that introduces. So this is a real example, not from anyone related to me, of course. My staging server rang every number in our database 100 times before I stopped it. This stuff happens. If you're not careful, you can get misled by how safe your staging sandbox is. Okay, I'm laboring the point now, but there's also operational differences. So is your staging environment really running on exactly the same number of instances, the same size of database as your production environment? And if it is, you're paying for all of that? You're doubling your cost of your infrastructure? So I'm almost certain that for most staging environments, there's going to be difference in performance, there's going to be difference in capacity, there's almost certainly going to be differences in access control and the certificates that are available, and all of the security implications for that. So a whole class of things that are going to be different in staging. So this was an example that was related to me. So we had, you know, just a different instance type, something compiled on one and didn't compile on the other. But it was almost like, because we assumed that we were going to catch this stuff in staging, we didn't bother applying the effort to provide tools to fix it and analyze it in production. It was like, okay, well, we'll catch it in staging because that's really simple. And then when things did break, we didn't have the tool set to do it. And this is a bit of a theme. I think part of what I want to get across is the stuff that we should be doing in production anyway means we can dissolve a lot of the rationale for staging. Finally, this notion of staging as a gate. You know, I think the fact that you're all at continuous delivery conference hopefully makes this one a bit of an easy sell. But obviously, each gate you're putting in your release pipeline is a point of contention. It increases stress on the system. Anything you can do incrementally and continuously reduces stress and should reduce contention. And it can be a locus of confusion and delay. Does anyone know who the fat controller is? Yeah, confusion and delay. So, you know, just at quite an abstract level, theoretical level, it's just a good idea to try and remove gates. Like the fact that you have got staging as a gate is a downside, not a positive. So yeah, this was an example someone sent me on Twitter. You know, the rest of us had to wait. It was a race to get changes into staging first. Right, something is not quite right here, and I'm sure there's other process things and cultural things that could change to mitigate this, but recognize it as something that has to be addressed when you're looking at the cost of implementing a staging environment. Okay, so just coming back and reviewing what the putative benefits of our staging environment were. So, surprise, I kind of think that a lot of them don't exist. So firstly, that low maintenance, actually, you're compelled to follow up with complex custom domain-specific code. And that doesn't go away. That's not like a one-shot. Every time you change production in some meaningful way, related to a meaningful change, you're going to have to come back and go, okay, so what does this mean for staging? Right, okay, and think through that and walk through that process. And that's effort that could be better spent, you know, solving great customer problems, right? I don't think it catches a broad class of configuration, integration, and data areas. I think it catches an arbitrary set, more or less by accident, because you can't predict, actually, what is going to be, what things are going to be called, what things aren't, because there are these irreducible differences between prod and staging. You don't actually know without further analysis what they're going to be. So the other day we had, we compile all our assets and bundle all our front-end assets up, and that change reached production and it broke a small subset of pages because it didn't work in prod. And my colleague said, because he knows I'm doing this talk, yeah, if we'd had staging, that would have fixed it. And actually, it wouldn't. And even if it had, it would have been completely arbitrary and only dependent on the specifics of how we'd accidentally configured staging or not, whether it would have caught it. It partitions errors, testing from users and the rest of the business. Okay, maybe it does a good job at partitioning errors and testing. Not always. Really, the challenge for the no staging mindset is to work out what the alternative here is. And hopefully I've explained why potentially having a gate in your release pipeline or reducing the number of gates is a goal to have. All right, so let's say at this point, hopefully I've explained why there are some hidden costs and risks associated with a staging environment. Now, I'm very excited to introduce my new startup. You're the first people to hear about this, www.bobcats today. And we're fintech bobcats for the sharing economy. You can order a bobcat and get it delivered to your door within 24 hours, working hours. And we're fintech. I don't know why we're fintech, but it's London, so I guess we're fintech, like everyone else is. Why not? So what I want to do, this is a fictional example. I'm going to work through, making quite a complex change and see what things would have to happen and what tools we'd use in order not to have staging, if that makes sense. Okay, so the change I want to introduce is we've got a brand new Bobcat affiliate. It's fantastic, which we want to introduce. We've now got more than one source to source ethical Bobcats from, ethical fintech sharing Bobcats. So clearly this is going to have impacts on different pieces of the system. We're going to have to present some new options to the customers, so that UX and UI, that experience and the emotion the customer feels, all of that, and someone in the business wants to make sure that we've absolutely nailed that before any customers see it. We're going to have to integrate a new payment on invoicing microservice, because obviously, Bobcats today is a microservice system. We're going to have to make some data schema changes to one or two databases. We're going to have to hook into a brand new API, api.bobcatsrus.biz. And we're going to have to do all this with zero downtime. And we're a bit concerned about performance because api.bobcats.biz are located in Tasmania or something. I don't know. A long way away. So contrast two approaches here. So in the staging approach, what we're going to do is kind of reach a known good state, and then we'll apply or replay those changes onto production. In a continuous no staging approach, we're going to focus on releasing stuff when it is releasable, not necessarily when it's complete. And I think that's like a fundamental shift in mindset, that we're not building up something that is complete. We're making sure that we're getting things all the way through to production as soon as it's releasable, which basically means it's not going to break anything. It's necessarily incremental, so we're going to do things in pieces. Again, we're not going to build up a large change set and then apply that. It's feature flagged, which means we can control with quite a fine grain who sees it, when, how often, etc. And we're going to do it in a defensive way, because firstly, that's a good thing to do anyway, but secondly, obviously, without a staging environment, we're going to have to redouble our efforts to be defensive. Okay, so I'm going to just sketch out what's going to happen with a few different challenges. Oh, sorry, the toolkit. What's in our toolkit? Oh, there's some prerequisites, right? So I could actually add to this list after Walter's talk as well. So the first thing is we need to be set up for feature toggles and dark launch. The second thing is we need to be able to do rolling releases of whatever service we've got, which essentially means being able to launch a specific version of a service and make sure that a specific set of consumers of that service get it or don't get it at will. And I could also add test first and acceptance first approach, and a high degree of collaboration. So applying the lessons of DevOps to working, the same degree of collaboration with testers, with design, with the rest of the business. Okay, so the first question is, so how does exploratory testing and sign-off happen without staging? Well, we're going to expose it via feature flags. Pretty straightforward. We're going to make sure that a specific set of users have the ability to go and view whatever changes that is. In fact, we might launch the UI changes without hooking anything else up as well. What about that API integration? Okay, so here's where we need to do the thing that we were going to do anyway and do it defensively. We're going to launch it in a way that doesn't actually impact any customer so no customer interaction will ever touch the new service. We're going to test it in production, and we're going to wrap it in a few good practices, like we're going to version that service. We're going to make sure that consumers and any outbound calls have got some backoff built in, and we're going to build in a kill switch. And a good toolkit for all of those things would be something like Hysterics by Netflix, right? Data integrity. So how do we make sure that when we're doing this exploratory testing, that our analytics and our data isn't getting really dirty? Well, the first thing is, I believe that we just do the things that we're going to be doing every night. No one's got a really clean database. All of us are doing some cleanup, filtering, and partitioning. Well, if we're doing that anyway, then why don't we just apply it to this exploratory activity, right? The second is aggregate analytics. Well, and I mean by that, Google Analytics or Mixpanel or whatever it might be, your own custom solution. Firstly, it's probably just going to be like noise within massive data if you're at sufficient scale. Secondly, most of these things you can set up to filter or ignore specific IPs or on specific on other triggers. What about those configuration changes? So again, launching things, doing a dark launch of these things into production environment should be sufficient to firewall the impact of something breaking. If a customer it's in the right environment, but no customer is interacting with it, then there's scope for it to fail, but fail safely. What about that schema migration? That seemed tricky. Well, again, I think broadly speaking, the story here is do it incrementally and make constructive changes, roll those out, make destructive changes, roll those out. What about code compatibility? Where we're changing old code for new code, and we need to verify that a response gets a request gets the same response, except where we've extended that capability. So branch-by-abstraction is part of the story there, which is a very handy software practice to have anyway. And these days, for most different software setups, you can get some kind of response comparison, something like GitHub Scientist, which will allow you to compare and log whether what you execute the old code and new code together, compare and monitor and instrument the difference if there is any. Really, really handy, and I recommend that. Okay, so there are remaining challenges. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go very quickly. So the first one is, what about performance? You want to load test, etc. SSL is a tricky one, and DNS-dependent capabilities. All of these three things I haven't really been able to solve without standing up what I call an ephemeral simulation server to distinguish it from a staging server. So this is it's short-lived. It's got a very specific task, and it lives and dies with that task. The task might be, I want to load test this specific version with this specific traffic. It's specific and explicit in the naming of it, in the design of it. You're calling out and identifying exactly what about production you're going to mirror. Is it the traffic? Is it the data? Is it some specific set of error conditions? And it's custom. It's always something that is in response to a specific, difficult, tricky application. Okay, so just to summarize very quickly, kind of 4 hypotheses, if you like. The first one is, if you can release it without downtime, you don't need to stage it. I don't know whether that's true, but I kind of feel it is true, and I'd love someone to go, yeah, but what about this? Number 2 is, if it's routine, it can be pushed into prod complex changes always need custom environments. Number 3, practices of continuous delivery are a necessity. Dissolving staging can be a virtuous side effect. Number 4, frequently practical and beneficial to test in prod. And that's me. So if you hear anyone say that in your team, just think, can I get rid of staging? And that's me. Thank you. Yeah, questions, challenges.
Yeah, so we're combining our time.
Yeah.
An important question for me is how do you protect against getting something critical on production and not?
So, 2 things I'll say. One is there's an irreducible need always to instrument, monitor, introduce defensive programming techniques and so forth. That doesn't go away no matter what pipeline, whatever deployment process you've got, whatever deployment pipeline you've got, that doesn't go away. So my thesis is, given you're going to have to do that and protect against that anyway, what's the point of staging? So it's kind of, the specifics of how you might do that are orthogonal to...
For example, the BAs can test something on staging before releasing it on production. We remember 1 or 2 years ago, a retailer started selling iPads, I think, 2 for 3 or 3 for the price of 2, and they actually failed completely because not able to sustain at the end of the day. Yeah. And it was a mistake on the
I don't know about
commercial
the
team.
I would say that having fine-grained control over who has access to that new feature via feature flags and having that in real time would be part of the story at protecting against that escalating critical issue.
So feature flag is one of the protection.
Yeah. Instrumenting and logging as well, so you're aware of the issue before it becomes too serious.
Yeah, they stopped the site, but it was too late.
Yeah.
Everything happened in 5-10 minutes.
That is probably caused by the fact that they were doing a bigger release and had staging environments, because then you actually have a coupling between the code that's being released and the content that's being released, like the iPads, which you really don't want to have. So you want to be able to release this particular feature, only see it behind the feature flag with whatever content that you want it to have. And then in the content management system, you can enable a particular product to be sold like that. Splitting it up into different responsibilities, like you should, will probably be safer.
Thanks.
If you want a performance test as part of your continuous delivery pipeline, then it seems like there's not much point in having an environment which is ephemeral. If you want to do that as part of every release, every deployment, just don't call it staging. Is that?
Unless you can load up the staging server to the same rate that you've got the live server with actually all the inputs going in here. I guess the answer is if you've got a staging server and, well, it's a whole staging environment, you're going to have to load that up identically to what actually the worst case of the live environment is, have all the monitoring in every single place, and have a whole load of infrastructure to go and provide that load, just to go and make it actually take the workload that you would actually get from live anyway.
Which you might run for 30 minutes, 1 hour, 24 hours. Yeah. If you're doing releases every 30 minutes, running every 30 minutes.
And if you're doing releases every 30 minutes, it's going to be very hard to cram a whole real load test into that, right? We have other ways of dealing with that. We have canary releases.
Yeah, exactly. Canary releases, rolling releases obviate some of the necessity of doing this all the time. And that's why, like, I come back to, if it's routine, then look at a way of trying to do it in production. If it's for a specific purpose, then you fall back on standing up something ephemeral and custom simulation.
Yeah. Also, if you're doing many releases, the releases will be small. The impact on performance will be small. And there's, yes. Yes, I will. And there is ways to actually predict at least some categories of impact on performance outside of full-scale performance tests.
Did you notice a drop in production bugs because you weren't using a staging environment anymore?
No. I wish I could say yes. But I definitely noticed an increase in the amount of value and speed we're able to deliver, which is different. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, just a comment from me. We do have a staging environment, but we also have dark clusters. We have blue-green for all of our solutions. Well, for a large proportion. So that means we can do post-production testing as well. So, eventually, the value of staging, if we get more and more pieces moving to that, goes down because you've actually got a production environment that isn't visible to clients.
Yeah.
Just to reverse the question that was asked before, did you notice an increase in the number of bugs in production by removing stage? Okay. Thank you.
So it sounds brilliant getting rid of staging. If you want to try to convince someone to do that, any kind of proposed hypotheses that you might try first to break down killing staging? Where might you start?
I think, so speaking from experience, I just took it activity by activity. So this is what you perceive as the risk, this is what you perceive as the benefit, here's how we could approach that using prod. And eventually you just end up with something that's not actually used. So that kind of divide and rule is, everything has to be done kind of piece by piece, I think. So,
I kind of have the same approach.
Specifically, what might be a kind of low-hanging fruit? Stop doing that in staging first.
I think the what I put under kind of QA, UAT, and sign-off. So having the capability of feature flags is very useful anyway. Using that to do those activities is quite easy to do.
Thanks.
If you're going to have a delivery pipeline, you are going to find that there's places where there's fear or there's lack of comfort in going to the next step. And for a long time, if you're building that, the next step is not going to be automated all the way into production, because there's things that you still feel you need to do, like BAs testing on a staging environment, because they're afraid of what will happen if they don't. So what you do is you build confidence, and you do that piece by piece, by problem, or fear by fear. And at some point, there's really nothing left, and then all there's left is fear itself, as the guy said.